Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. And I'm super excited that in our last sourcing webinar, we have the one and only Mike Cohen, aka the Batman. Mike, so happy to see you. So happy that you're here.
Yeah, man. Always happy to be back with Matcher.
Yeah, no, absolutely unbelievable. Guys, for the people that don't know who I am, so I'm Adrian Kolf. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Matcher. Super happy to be your host for these sourcing webinars. But the true guest of honor, of course, is Mike. I just asked Mike a little bit ago, how many years of sourcing experience do you have? Like, how long have you been in this industry? And Mike actually said only 3 years. I'm like, in sourcing, and I cannot believe, in terms of where Mike is, how far out he's there. It feels to me that he has all the knowledge regarding sourcing in the world in that sense, and we often go to Mike to help us, basically, as advice, to like, how do you guys do your outreaches? What tools do you use in that sense? And Mike always has like the latest technologies and tools that he uses. But it's been only 3 years, of course.
That's right.
Before, you've been, as you just said, a lifetime in recruitment in that sense. So you know the game, you know the industry in that sense. But actual sourcing, only 3 years. So anyone that just started in sourcing, 3 years, and last year, Mike was one of our keynote speakers and one of the highest rated speakers, actually. So in 2 years, guys, that's all it takes to become a keynote speaker at Matcher, to be invited for all these cool conferences in that sense, and build your own company, because that's what Mike has, Wayne Technologies. Yeah.
That's right. Dedicated. Actually, it's funny, Adrian, Nikeo, who works for me, I hired him when he was 20 years old. Yeah. Never worked in the recruiting space ever, right? I had to teach him literally how to use LinkedIn to like make his account, right? And in his first, 13 months working in this industry, he had 5 articles published. He'd spoken at 3 conferences, had done 4 webinars, and got paid for one of the conferences and one of the webinars. So you're less than a year away from being able to really contribute and become a thought leader, guys.
Sick. Unbelievable. And guys, FYI, I've never been paid for any conference. So, like, Mike, you work your magic, man. You work your magic. Absolutely incredible. Guys, as always, if you have any questions, just type them in the chat. And Mike, I forgot to ask, do you have double screen? Are you able to see the chat or not?
Well, do I have 2 screens?
Yeah, no, Mike, okay. Sorry, stupid question. I was like, guys, honestly, why we were a little late, because Mike was setting up his entire studio, green screens, zooming in, zooming out. It's unbelievable in terms of the studio that Mike has. So Mike can see the chat, so type away if you have any questions in that sense. Yeah, look at this, guys. This is Mike. This is Mike talking about a professional setup. The Batcave,
we gotta have fun, right?
Yeah, the Batcave is real. The Batcave is real. I'm not going to waste any more of your times, guys. Type in the question that you have. We have a little bit of room at the end, of course. Mike, the floor is yours, and super excited to have you here.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Thank you. David, I love that you knew exactly how many screens I've got. And yeah, man, I actually keep all my clothes in my closet in my office. And the story I share at the end of this presentation will actually explain that, which is really, really funny. There is a full Batman, we'll call it a suit, but it's actually just feety pajamas. But, whatever, I'll wear it how I want. So guys, welcome. We're going to be talking today a lot about metrics, KPIs, and data. And if you follow anything I do on Facebook, for example, you'll notice I've had it out with some people in the last few days. So like, I am fired up about this. So like, if I start swearing and stuff, I'm real sorry. I'm just fired up. So I am going to share my screen with y'all, and we are going to get this rocking and rolling. Boom, boom. Okay, you guys should be able to see my screen. Can y'all let me know that you guys can see this? Yeah?
All good. All good.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it, man. So here's where we're at. Quick intro to me if you don't know me. My name is Mike. Everybody calls me Batman. I'm pretty cool with it. This is my team. We are subject matter experts in the sourcing space. We do sourcing on demand, but it is completely deliverables based. Very, very different type of approach. I'm a conference speaker. I actually love speaking at conferences and webinars. There's two reasons. Number one, I love training. I love giving back to the community. The other is I like being the center of attention, which is actually the reason that I'm an indoor cycling instructor. I don't actually love indoor cycling. I've only taken 4 classes in my life that I wasn't teaching, but man, do I love being the center of attention, yelling at people and making them listen to electronic music. I'm a big fan of pushing boundaries, guys, and pushing limits. If you know me as a human, you know that that's true. I press a lot of buttons. This is me on the physical world, pushing boundaries. I ran the New York Marathon in 2017. I ran a half Ironman in 2018. If you've ever seen me in person, you're probably going, oh, you did that? Yeah, I get it. I know what I look like. I get that that's not what you guys think. But the reason I share that is I really, really try to approach this business and most areas of my life looking at like, what can I do? And then can I do something better than that? I am a big fan of memes and GIFs. There's not a lot during this presentation. Sorry, I'm trying to keep it pretty straightforward because it's a really serious topic for me. Those are my dogs. That's Blue and Honey. I like them more than 99.9% of the humans I've ever met. They are my favorite living creatures outside of my wife, who is right here, who is totally kick-ass and awesome. She is definitely my better half. She's a principal at Mercer HR, and she is just an absolute friggin' rock star. Yvonne, I don't have a favorite EDM artist. I'm not going to lie to you. It's definitely not Calvin Harris. I'm not going to lie to you, Sagi. But I have entire playlists I can share with y'all. Right now, Head and Heart has been my like summer banger. And yes, Srinivasa, Blue is on the left. She is the bluish grayish one. Last, big fan of the word flossom. I share that because I am completely messed up as a human. I know I seem like in certain areas I have my shit together. I don't. There are tons of areas where I do. There's tons of areas where I don't, and I'm just okay with that. And it comes out at the end of the day to realizing that we're all totally messed up, and that's what makes us unique and awesome. So, all right, here's our agenda. We're going to talk real brief about sourcers versus recruiters. We're going to talk about data points, kind of what they look like. We're going to discuss kind of like why they're so important, and what they represent, and then how to actually get the data points that we're going to be talking about. So, yeah, Flossom's awesome. What's up, Shveek? So, guys, sourcing versus recruiting. On all of these slides, by the way, the ones that introduce a new topic, I was feeling like snarky and funny, so I put like what I think people's reactions would be, not you guys, but other people who don't know what the hell we're doing, under here in gray. So hopefully you get a chuckle out of that. Sourcing versus recruiting. Guys, if you can anybody share with me just quick yes or no? Are these the same thing? Like, are these the same people? Is a sourcer the same as a recruiter? Recruiter the same as a sourcer? Yes or no? Mike Vroman, a sourcer is definitely a junior recruiter. Yeah, 100%, man. Yep. Okay, cool. Yeah, we got a crowd who gets me. That's fantastic. I can be snarky. You guys rock. So, yeah, I made that joke just for anybody who's like, Roman, what are you talking about? Somebody asked a question on Facebook a while ago, and my response, without any connotation at all, was like, I think a sourcer is just a junior recruiter. And people were definitely not pleased with that. Joker says a sourcer is not a recruiter, but a recruiter should be a sourcer. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I hear what you're saying. Let me explain to you why. Yeah, Anna, you're totally right. Smaller companies, right, where you're going to work that full cycle, you have to be a sourcer, recruiter, account manager, the whole kit and caboodle, 100%. But the actual skill set themselves are inherently different. So here's how I kind of break out the recruiting workflow from sourcing candidates all the way through processing them. And you'll see everything that's more on like that reddish scale, I attribute way more to the sourcing side. The green is more on the recruiting side. Claudio, so interesting perspective on that. My perspective and personal opinion, which I'm happy to debate with folks about, is the sourcing process should take place up to the screening of the candidate. Sourcers should not be screening candidates. They should be left off before that phone call communication. with candidates. There's a few reasons for that. Number one, most solid sourcers I know, while they're capable of doing phone screens, they don't love it. They'd rather be stuck in the data and data mining, finding people, scraping, enriching, curating, etc. Most recruiters I know don't love the idea of looking at spreadsheets all day. They want to network and make connections. So in terms of the humans who are doing the job, not typically great to have sourcers doing phone screens. In terms of the efficacy of the process, it's not great because there's gaps between the sourcer's communication on the phone and the recruiter's understanding of that sourcer's communication on the phone. I don't care how great of notes you take. There's always going to be some type of gap there. And for the candidate, it's actually the worst. And this is what I compare it to, right? Imagine going on a first date with somebody and like, you get deep, right? You start sharing all that stuff about your family and those things you did when you were a kid, blah, blah, blah. And then they follow up, set up a second date. And they're like, hey, we'd love to set up a second date with you, but I'm going to have you go out with my best friend. Don't worry. I told him all about you. That's not going to vibe, right? Like I don't care who you are. The handoff like that is very disconcerting for candidate experience. Yvonne, if you enjoy both, that totally makes sense. You're totally entitled to enjoy both. One of them will ultimately prevail as your passion though. If it hasn't yet, it will for sure. It took me 10 and a half years for sourcing to prevail for me. And then it took me another year to actually decide that it was okay for me to just be a sourcer and not a recruiter. Carrie, I don't mind talking to people, just really bad at seeing the bad things in people. Yeah, Carrie, you strike me as a rose-colored glasses person. You're like the sweetest, nicest human ever. So guys, I actually ran a survey. I've actually gotten over like 400 or 500 results, but I haven't tallied up the rest of them. So of the 180 results, 130 believe that sourcers and recruiters are very different. Not even just different from one another, very different. Only 3 people out of the 180 said that what makes a good recruiter is the same as what makes a good sourcer. And I'm not going to lie to you, their title may have rhymed with Tumen T sourcers. So I don't want to call out anybody in HR, but they clearly didn't get it. Everybody else, guys, gets that we're very, very different in what we do. So really, really important and need to be cognizant as we move forward, kind of talking about these metrics to realize, hey, we are actually very, very different. And therefore, what we do is going to actually define the metrics that we use.
It's not who you are underneath. It's what you do that defines you.
Yeah, that's right. So, guys, metrics versus KPIs versus goals, right? We are not going to talk about goals. If you don't know what a goal is, you are on the wrong webinar. I literally can't help you. But what we are going to talk about is a differentiator mainly between metrics and KPIs. So how many people coming in, and don't be ashamed, because when I started doing this, I thought metrics and KPIs were the same thing. So how many people believe right now, or until I just asked this question right now, that metrics and KPIs were actually the same thing? How many people? Anybody? Anybody think they're the same thing? Metrics lead you to KPIs. I love that. All right, yeah, Srinivasa, I dig that, man. I don't disagree with that at all. All right, cool. So all of you already know this fact. So you're already like 10 steps ahead of where I am. Metrics are how you measure your KPIs. Very, very similar. Sure. Not the same. Nope. Okay, cool. Well, you guys are at a different level than I was when we started. So you guys are going to be awesome. All right, here we go. KPIs. So I did some research around this and looked up what are the definitions of KPIs, right? And you can read on the page. I looked at Investopedia, KPI.org. The KPI stands for Key Performance Indicators, what they do for a living, and Gartner. If you're reading these off the page right now, what you're kind of realizing is these are the signs that people have of how the business is doing. This is basically going to tell you, hey, How are things going? And here's kind of the way that I think about this. My analogy is it's like that the heart rate monitor in a hospital, right? So you're hooked up to the heart rate monitor and kind of like this is what you're hearing, right? Cool. That makes sense. So now all of a sudden, that starts speeding up. That's going much, much faster. That's going much, much faster, right? And then all of a sudden, it's like hyper fast. You're not flatlining, but it's like, so holy shit, something's wrong. But you don't know what's wrong. You don't know what to do. You can't actually take any level of action to stop that from happening. You just know, whoa, we've got to take a look at this thing. That is your KPI. So the definition that I settled on, because I'm doing this presentation, I can make up whatever I want, is the KPI is the end result of your tactical actions being sought, meaning the KPI is going to show you what the results of the things that you were doing are. They're not going to show you how good you are at doing those things or effective or efficient. They're just going to show you what are the end results of what you're doing. Here's some examples of KPIs within the recruiting process, right? When you're looking at number of messages sent or number of submissions, all right, those are some popular ones that people keep track of, or number of qualification calls, even really popular things that people say like, those are our metrics. Those aren't metrics, they're KPIs. Do you want to know how I know? Because all of a sudden, if Carrie Collier, and Carrie, I'm calling you out because I know you and love you, she would never do this. She's a rock star. All of a sudden, you looked at her numbers and she was sending 50 messages a week and doing 5 qualification calls a week. You would look at that and go, whoa, we've got a problem here. First off, do you? You don't actually know that. How many submissions, interviews, and hires is she getting? Number 2, it doesn't actually tell you what to do. Like, where's the problem? Why is that a problem? Why is Carrie not getting more than 5 qualification calls? The short answer is she does 5 qualification calls. She gets 5 submissions. She gets 5 interviews and 1 hire. Holy crap, right? That is a KPI, not a metric. Stop calling them metrics and stop holding people accountable to them. So what's a metric? That's a great question. So a metric is more, again, you can read these off the page yourself. These are the measurable items that you can actually look at and say, oh, this isn't the end result. This is measuring the actions that we're taking to achieve that end result. Yeah, Carrie, you're totally awesome. Obviously, you know that already. So that's how we want to look at a metric. Oh, what's up, Aaron? I don't have a sock puppet ready for you. I'm sorry. So that's the way when you think of a metric is, does this tell me the story of what I'm doing, not the result of what I'm doing? They're very, very different. And so again, I made up my own definition, which is the measure of tactical efficacy and efficiency. A metric is telling you, hey, are you doing a good job? And are you doing a good job efficiently? Yeah, Aaron, sock puppet account for sure. And also, just for the record, Aaron, don't you still have that other one, the really funny, like, drinky one? I hope so, because that was a really funny account. Not that you ever would set up a fake account, for the record, if LinkedIn's on here anywhere. That's obviously a joke that I'm making, but if you did, it'd be really funny. So guys, metrics. Here's some examples of, these are not KPI examples, sorry. It's supposed to say metric examples. That's what I get for rushing through that. Guys, these, if you look at them, all have a percentage sign or a versus between them, right? How many things did you view versus message, right? How many people did you email that responded to you? How many people are you interviewing who applied to your job versus you sourced, right? Oh yeah, logarithmic out. Yeah, that's amazing. If you guys haven't looked at that, you totally need to check that out. Those are going to be your metric examples. So here's a full list of everything that I found that people track internally within a sourcing or recruiting team to determine things like efficacy. This is, again, it's a full list. You'll have access to this later. I'm not going to really go here. Michael, clarify passive versus active candidates. So a passive candidate is somebody who is sourced. So you went out, you found them, you don't know that they're looking for a job. You just reached out cold and said, hey, we should totally chat. An active candidate is one who applied to your job. They actually reached out to you, typically through an application, to say, hey, I want this job. So, yes, from the last slide is a metric, correct? Yes, 100% accurate. Thanks, Michael. So from that huge list, here's the full list of all of your KPIs that are on there. So if you are tracking these and you're saying, oh, what are your metrics? And these numbers are showing up, please understand you are not looking at metrics, you're looking at KPIs. They actually mean different things, which is what I got into an argument about over the last 2 days on Facebook. Somebody was saying like, oh, these are really good and this is how we see success. I'm like, no, it's not. That is how you measure your success. It's very different. Time to hire is the only kind of caveat here. It doesn't really fall into one or the other as a KPI or a metric. It kind of straddles the line. And the reason is, it's more of a KPI, but it can be used as a metric for the organization because it takes into account things like candidates, recruiters, and hiring managers. And so it's a little bit more comprehensive than just like, hey, what have you produced? What work have you done today? Again, from the full list of metrics and KPIs, here are all of the metrics. As you'll see, there are a lot more of them, but how many are we actually tracking here? How many of these do we actually keep track of? How many of these do we hold our folks or ourselves accountable to? Again, caveat on that time to hire. It's not really a true metric or a true KPI. It straddles the line. And then the other kind of caveat is between the submissions and offers. This is just to give a more holistic view on how well your sourcing is doing. It can almost be considered a KPI, but I wanted to be really careful because it is a percentage sign. And I am basically blanket statementing that metrics are 99% of the time a percentage. The number is 8%, not a raw number. So I'm going to stop for like 2 seconds and see if you guys have any questions on what we've covered so far between metrics and KPIs. Do we understand what the difference is and what the examples of these metrics and KPIs are? I wonder if there's some type of delay here. Yeah, cool. Thanks, Adrian. I appreciate that, man. I'll give it another like 5 seconds. And then I'm going to get going. I don't know if y'all are here. Did anybody like fall asleep? Why is Net Promoter Score a KPI? Because it doesn't tell a story of tactically what to do. It tells a story around your success in doing a thing. If I said, hey, your Net Promoter Score is awesome. Cool. That's great. You're doing a good job. But if I said, hey, Allah, your Net Promoter Score is not good, which yours definitely is, that doesn't tell you why your Net Promoter Score is low. It doesn't tell you like, oh, cool, now that I know that, I can take this action. It just means, whoa, I've got to go check out why this thing is so low, or why is this thing so high? Hopefully that makes sense. Michael Vroman, I was more asking about how you track passive versus active candidates as a metric. Is there a benchmark to aim for in that? Michael, the idea of benchmarks, really, really interesting. We're going to talk about the idea of benchmarks and like industry standards or whatever BS people are saying now in like 2 minutes. So I will definitely get to that. So why are we talking about this? The main reason, people are misusing KPIs and metrics. It's gotten to a point of infuriation for me, watching people holding others and themselves accountable to KPIs. How many messages did you send? How many submissions did you make? Who gives a shit? That doesn't matter, right? You should track that for sure. But like, it doesn't actually matter in the grand scheme of things. If they tell you 10 or 100, it doesn't actually mean they're doing a good job or not. It just means they're throwing a lot of shit against the wall or not. So Why? Tracking versus accountability. So guys, I'm not saying don't track your KPIs, right? You should definitely track them still, and you should be using them to understand where your deficiencies and where your strengths are, right? That's what's going to tell you, right? If you're making one placement a month, ooh, you got to maybe look at some stuff, right? If you're sending out 500 messages a day, you probably need to look at that. That's not super great, right? If you're getting 3 responses a day, I'd probably take a look at that, right? Dig into some of the metrics behind that, but it only tells you what you need to focus on, not how or why. The accountability side, this is actually what you're holding people to. This is your metrics, guys. This is the story. This is basically how we're sharing how well we're doing, how efficient and how effective are we in our jobs. That is what you want to hold your employees and yourself to. They are your turn rates, not your numbers. I don't care if you make 10 phone calls a week or a day. I literally don't care. What do I care about? What's your conversion rate from phone calls to submissions? Because if you're making 50 calls a week and making 5 submissions, and this other person's making 10 calls a week and making 5 submissions, they are better than you at this job. Period. In which case, your 50 calls a week don't mean crap to me, right? You're getting the same level of output and they're doing way less work. That's what I want to know. So it comes down to that idea of like working harder versus working smarter. Right? What do you want to do? Try and just throw as much shit at the wall as humanly possible and see what sticks? That's what KPIs are for. If you hold yourself to KPIs, that's what you're doing. You're basically saying, I don't care to measure how good I am at my job. I just care to measure how hard I'm working. Versus metrics where say, hey, I will get the results if I can understand how to be the most effective and efficient at every stage of the process. So the why and the how of the metrics. So I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to bring back up what Roman had shared about this, about like industry standards, benchmarks, etc. One of the ways that you can tell that the things you're holding your recruiters accountable to are total bullshit is if the number ends in a 0 or a 5. If you're like, we need to make 10 calls a day, why 10? Why not 9? Why not 11? Why not 12? Why not 4? Right? And the answer typically is, well, that's what we think that they should be making a day. Oh, cool. So can we just state it this way and say, hey, why 10? Oh, because I'm completely full of shit and I thought 10 was a really cool number. It's way cooler than 9 or 11, so let's do 10. What? So you want a benchmark? You want a standard? You want to know what to hold your people to? Cool. Do your own research. Don't throw out random shit to hold people accountable to. Look at what's been successful for each person over the last 3 months. Look at their turn rates and then work backwards if you really need to figure out that number, right? But at the end of the day, even if you work backwards and you're like, hey, new recruiter who started in the last 3 months, your average turn rate means that if you make 8 submissions, you're going to make 1 placement. That's cool. But that means that if you hold that person to making 8 submissions a week, that they're only going to try to work harder and harder, not smarter. Because working smarter means I don't want to make 8 submissions a week. I want to make 6 and make 1 placement. But that's not what you're holding them to. You're holding them to making 8 submissions because in your mind, you think that that's some reasonable way to gauge somebody's work. How much shit are you doing? Who cares? How well are you doing it? That is what matters. It is not a static goal. It's a dynamic goal. The goal should be changing on this as your metrics move forward. So let's look at some of these, how we get them, why they're important, right? So one of the things we love to track is how many profiles did we have to view to message them, right? And the reason why this is so important to us is it's going to tell us the efficacy of our actual Boolean and our searching itself, right? If we have to look at 500 profiles to message 100 people Think about the time suck involved in looking at those 400 people we didn't message. What can we do to get better to lower the amount of time we're spending doing that so we can be more productive in the future, right? How do we actually do this? We actually scrape all of the data from everywhere. So if you're using like a Seek Out, a Hire tool, Amazing Hiring, Human Prediction, et cetera, you can just export your lists and it'll give you all your data. However, yeah, Srinivasa, the benchmark is derived from mediocre performance, but the benchmark when you're looking at like number of messages sent or number of calls made, you're basically hindering somebody from getting better at the job. You're encouraging them to just work harder, right? Versus saying, hey, I've noticed it takes you 8 people, 8 submissions to get an interview. Your goal for next month is to make that turn rate 7. I want to look at your numbers next month and realize that it only took you 7 submissions to make a placement, right? Then you get that number all the way down. They only have to make 4 submissions to make a placement. Holy crap, that's awesome. How do we increase the number of submissions you're making now? Now, what can we do to get that number up? Because man, that turn rate is phenomenal, right? So, sorry, back to this. Profiles viewed versus message. Thanks, Srinivasa. You totally got me like fired up, man. We use a tool called Quickly. It is by Andre Bradshaw, contribute to his Patreon, and it will scrape LinkedIn, or you can take a bunch of LinkedIn URLs and it'll scrape that data. And so what we're doing is actually scraping all of this information out, and we put everything into a spreadsheet. We do not, thanks, Roman. I appreciate that, man. The extension Roman put in is for Andre's Patreon. So we do not look at a single profile on these platforms. We export every one of them and every piece of information to these Excel files because it is way faster and it's way easier to keep track of how many profiles total did we look at versus how many then did we wind up messaging, right? So for us, Google Sheets is the ultimate at the end of the day. Anybody else here love them some spreadsheets and use them fairly often? Anybody? Got another question. Hang on. How would you politely, you're asking the wrong person, Nafar, explain to a hiring manager asking you to send 100 messages a week, otherwise you're not doing your job, that they are so wrong? I would just explain this exact same concept to them, right? If you are looking at, let's say it's technology, right? If you're looking at a technology role, you could turn that around and be like, hey, just so you know, what you're basically saying for me that you want me to do, it would be the same as me saying, I want your software engineers to write 10,000 lines of code a week. It doesn't mean anything, right? The 10,000 lines of code could be total crap. But now they're just striving to write as much as humanly possible to fulfill that versus, hey, I want you to write the least amount of lines of code that you can to get this thing done or to get this thing so it does what we need it to. For a sales manager, it's a very, very similar conversation of like, hey, for sales, do you either want people to close 1 deal a week or do you want people to make 100 calls a week, which is more important to you, right? Well, closing 1 deal a week. Okay, cool. What if it only takes me 10 calls to do that? Well, but, right, they're going to be really stuck. It's going to be a hard thing to kind of deal with for them. Hiring managers should not be dictating your recruiting efforts. Yeah, no, David, I knew what you meant, man, for sure. Carrie, so each sourcer has a custom goal based on where they are today and create a success plan based on improvements, blah, blah. Yep, exactly. You want to focus for each recruiter where their skill set is here and where you want to get them to, which is ultimately the lowest turn rates possible and then the highest input and output possible. And if you're thinking, oh my gosh, well, how are we going to have separate goals for each person? I don't know. Do you hire a bunch of robots or do you hire humans? Because if you hire robots, yeah, cool. They'll have the same goal. Just make the same goal. They do the same thing. Everything will be fine. But like, we're humans, right? In a world where DEI is so important, why don't we actually treat people like they're different? Treat people as though they are the human they are, not the robot you want them to be. So yeah, Carrie, you're totally right. Rock on. Searches per search. So this one is interesting. I want to know how many times I have to run a search before I have enough candidates to give to our clients. For us, we're deliverables based, so it's a little different. For you guys, it would be how many searches do you have to run before you filled the pipeline for the hiring managers. If you're in management, you teach your team of sourcers how to track their own efforts and then analyze, be able to optimize. Yeah, 100%, David. Completely agree, man. So how do I track my number of searches per search? Check this out, guys. We literally write down every single string that we write on every platform for every search. So if you look at a candidate from one of our lists that we have and you said, hey, where'd you get that person? We could say, hey, we found that person on Seekout and here was the exact search string that we used to find that person. And it helps us to know, hey, how many searches total did we have to run? And also, which of the platforms were the most successful? You can actually track that now on the back end. So here's how we do that, right? We scrape all of our data, as I told you, and then we assign, we call them revolutions. We literally assign each of the revs to the candidates. So you import a whole list of 100 people and you just make a column that says R2, and you know that R2 is associated with this string. It's super, super simple to keep track of. I know it doesn't seem that way, but it is super, super simple. It just takes a little bit more work. Do I also track revisits to those searches? Roman, I don't, because of the way we work. We're deliverables based. So like we run a search for a client and then we never reuse a search or a list ever. It's a policy of ours. So like even if it's the same role in the same geography, we run different searches starting from scratch. Sorry, I read the word tracking. Open and response rates. I am really hoping that I don't have to explain to you guys why this shit's important. Your open rate determines how good your subject line is. Your response rate determines whether you're reaching out to the right people and whether your messaging is good or not. I've done entire presentations. I think the last time with Matcher, I actually did my presentation on messaging. So if you're interested in learning more about this, you can ping Adrian or the Matcher team directly. I'm sure they'll be able to hook you up with that link. But important to note, you need to track this. You need to understand what works best, right? We know the differences in messaging we need to have when we're reaching out to like accountants and tax and audit folks versus software engineers versus sales, because we've tracked it over time and we test it and realize, hey, these things work better than these other things, right? Yeah, Srinivasa, email reputation, delivery, exact same thing, man. It's all about boom. Got to get that money. It's exactly what it's right. That's exactly what it's about, man. So here's some random facts. Enjoy them. Read them. We use a tool called Sourcewell for this. It's my fave. But this should track all of this data for you, right? Your reply rates, your open rates, et cetera, et cetera. It should track all of this data. If you're using any email automation or CRM tool, it will do that for you. So looking at, yeah, that's right, Carrie. I know you love them too. So guys, looking at the rest of the stats here a little bit faster, here's kind of what they do and what they represent. I'm not going to go over each of these with you. You can read the page. If you guys have any questions about any of these, just put it in the chat and I'll take some time and I'll go over it. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going. I got a question of how to assess conversion rate and make a forecast on how many need to be submitted to make a job order, I'm assuming placement. For example, I analyzed conversion rates for June, but with some candidates, I'm still in touch. For what period should I analyze for timeline? So it wouldn't be a timeline. It would be for a role. It's not based on how many per week. That's the whole thing. The per week thing doesn't actually matter. The timing you're associating with it doesn't matter. To fill a role, work backwards, right? How many messages, how many searches do you need to run before you have enough candidates? How many profiles viewed before you have enough messaged? How many messaged before you get enough responses? How many responses before you get, and you're going to look at all of the turn rates all the way down. So the time is less important. What's more important is, hey, how long did this take you? Or excuse me, not how long. How many revolutions of work did this take you to get to point B, right? Starting at point A. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, you can re-clarify and I'll re-ask again or re-answer again. So time to hire, the one with the asterisk next to it. Here's the deal, guys. there's a bunch of ways to track it. I don't track this. I don't suggest people typically track it. And the reason I don't suggest it is it's way too nebulous. So like, cool. So this job took you 3 weeks from opening to filling. This job took you 3 months. It doesn't actually tell you anything. Because then you have to look at like, oh, cool. How many roles was the recruiter working on? Was this their primary focus? Was the hiring manager hiring for multiple roles? Was this their primary focus? Was the hiring manager out on vacation? Was the recruiter out on vacation? Did you have candidates who needed to stall the process? Did you need to stall the process to get approval for finding? There's way too much stuff that goes into it. So cool if you want to know generally and maybe be able to drill down, but there's way too much stuff to drill down into to be able to have it as like a legit metric or KPI. It's a thing to note and be mindful of, right? If you have multiple jobs that are taking you 3 to 6 months to fill, probably a thing you should look at, right? If you have multiple jobs, tech jobs or sales jobs that you're filling in 2 to 3 weeks, you should probably look at that and write a white paper, because that would be so dope. Also contact me. I really want to know what you're doing. Active versus passive. This is for you, Roman. I really just want to know on this one, what is more cost effective? Is it sourcing or is it dealing with the inbound candidates? Because here's the deal. Whenever I do a training for a company that I always hear like we actually fill 50% of our jobs with people who are applying to them. And if you hear that in the background, sorry, neighbors are doing their lawn apparently. And I'm like, oh, cool. So 50%, that's cool. But how much of your time are your recruiters spending on dealing with all the applications, posting the jobs, updating all the applications who are the passes, getting everything loaded into the ATS, following up with all those candidates who applied for the job, right? And typically, people don't track it, but when they do, they realize, oh, we're actually spending like 60 to 70% of our time dealing with inbound. Right. So if you're spending 60% of your time and getting 50% of your results, you're spending your time inefficiently. That's just a fact. But do you actually know that? Do you know that you're getting, 30% of your placements from applicants and only spending 10% of your time there? Cool. That's a great avenue. You may want to invest more in job advertisements. Are you getting 40% of your placements and spending 80% of your time? Maybe look elsewhere. Right? Passive. So Srinivasa, maybe passive can be cost effective. It might not be, right? Are you hiring for hairstylists or truck drivers? Active is going to be way better for you, right? Post, get people to apply to your jobs, build that pipeline really, really fast. You're not going to typically be able to source online as many CDL drivers who are passive candidates as you'd be able to get from people applying to your jobs and doing a really good marketing and posting kind of campaign. Roman, I know you know what the difference is between active and passive candidates for sure, man. How we measure it, we just mark the source. So we mark the source of the candidates, and then the big one, and this is a pain in the ass, man. I actually had my guys, I had them do this for the hell were the processes we needed to track. Oh, it had to do with email finding in our process, right? And I just wanted to know like which tool was the most efficient. And so we used an extension called Toggle, T-O-G-G-L, so they could track their time while they were doing that. Oh, and the other was email checking. How much of their time every day was spent checking emails to see, hey, is there maybe a program like Phrase Express or Jamelius or something that we can use to help template out responses to make it a faster, a more efficient. So we track our time using Toggle, and then the results, obviously, you know how to track, man. You just mark the sources, whether they're, an applicant or where they came from. So measuring the no's. This is really important. This is neither a metric nor a KPI. I just felt the need to share it with you because it's super, super, super important. So the reason we do everything in the spreadsheet is we eliminate people, as you can see here on the tags, because of particular reasons, right? So like this person for a manager of ad operations, not going to be the right fit for a senior or lead product manager. So we eliminate because of title. And what we're able to do at the end of all of our searches is share not just, hey, here's the 100 people we reached out to. We're able to be like, hey, of the 500 profiles we looked at, here's why we didn't message these 200 people. And we can actually go through with the hiring manager and have a really, really intelligent conversation around data. So we're not coming in with that BS of like, well, this candidates aren't out there. I looked at like all the profiles. Oh, did you? Prove it. Okay, cool. Hey, check it out. Here's all the platforms I searched on. Here's every Boolean string I wrote on every platform. Here's every candidate who came up in every one of those searches. Here's the reasons I eliminated every one of the candidates I didn't message. Here's all the candidates I did message. Holy crap. That's a different conversation, right? How do I scrape my search with Quickly when I do an X-ray? Great question, Sagi. So I would use a tool called Link Gopher. It's a Chrome extension. It's free. You click it and you can scrape all of the URLs off of a page. So if you set your Google search results to 100 and then use Link Gopher, it'll scrape the 100 URLs for you. And then use Quickly and just plug the LinkedIn URLs in and it'll scrape all the profiles for you. Good question. We also keep track of different platforms, which I talked about earlier. So every time we pull candidates into a spreadsheet, we mark where they came from. And the idea is, like, this is a dashboard. This is an older dashboard, but it's a dashboard that we use to show our clients, hey, here's the number right for the Go engineer. We looked at 748 profiles, and we wound up delivering you 160 of them. Here's the exact platforms that they came from. So you can see exactly how many profiles we looked at from each platform. Anna, are you talking about the scraping tool? The scraping tool is called Quickly. Mike Vroman, if you scroll up a little bit, he actually put in the link to contribute to Andre's Patreon to get it. So we keep track of this. Why? Because the numbers aren't always indicative of how well the platform works, right? If you're looking at Amazing Hiring, you're like, whoa, you got 269 people off the platform. That's awesome. Yeah, but we only got 3 intros. They only represented 10% of our introductions, right? Versus human predictions, we got 13 introductions. That's a huge difference. So we want to know why we're using different platforms and which are the most effective. Glenn Gumacher, I didn't even know you were here, man. So awesome to have you here. All right, guys, workflow setup. No, to answer the question of the person who I fictionally made up here, this does not automatically happen. Another question. How did I make a dashboard in Google Sheets? Do I calculate it? No, I have a whole bunch of formulas in there, man. It took, man, I don't know. Sorry. It took, I don't know, a couple hundred hours of development over the last couple of years to build out all the dashboards that call and pull from different sheets and stuff. I highly suggest getting really good with Excel or Google Sheets. It will save you a ton of time. How do I eliminate duplicates when searching across multiple platforms? Yes, so I use the LinkedIn URLs unique identifier. Quickly is awesome because it normalizes all the data for you. And then there's a tool in Google Sheets called Power Tools, actually. It's not super expensive at all. And it has an automatic dedupe function that can go down. It also has got a whole bunch of like merge functions. So if you're deduping and like some of the platforms provide a GitHub URL, some provide email addresses, you can merge them so it retains all the data. It's pretty solid. How do you keep track of all these spreadsheets and not fuck everything up with so much data and get super slow? Because I fucked everything up a bunch and things got really slow, and I found a way to to change it to make it faster. I just made the mistakes enough, right? What is the name of the extension scraping the URLs from Google search? It's called Link Gopher. Thanks, David. Do I use an ATS? I use an ATS when we do executive search. Otherwise, not really. And here's the reason. ATSs generally, because we work with different clients, we're not internal, right, at a company where you should definitely be using an ATS. Every search we run is different. The client's different, the needs are different. And so searching through an ATS is never going to be as effective for us as using our tooling to search the internet at large. So what do I mean? I love using the seek out Boolean function to be able to search in position descriptions. So I want to look in the actual descriptions themselves of each of the jobs people have posted on LinkedIn. There's no way to do stuff like that within an ATS unless you are literally importing their entire profile and your ATS has the ability to search through each individual portion of everybody's profile, and it calculates how long they've been at their current job, how long they've been at their previous job, whether they're still currently employed, and whether your ATS then also updates all of that data for you automatically, periodically. None of them do that, zero. So it's just, for us, it's not a tool that helps. Data Miner is awesome, Vroman, but if you're literally just running an X-ray search on Google and need to pull off the links that come back, just use something simple like Link Miner. So your ATS is basically your spreadsheets in that sense. We actually just don't have an ATS at all. Remember, every single search we do is from scratch. So we build out the comprehensive list, we deliver that list, and then for the next client who needs something, we're starting all over again from scratch. So we have, if we're thinking about it as an ATS, we have like, I don't know, 120 ATSs and like, I don't know, a few 100,000 candidates, something like that. Specific link for quickly. So that one I can't help you with. You got to contribute to Andre before you can get it. How do I keep track of all the different spreadsheets per role client on your overall metrics? Do I have a mother sheet? No. So we do it per client. The same as I suggest people do it per recruiter. Each client, each role, each location is going to have a different metric associated with it based on each of those variables that is sometimes harder to track and harder to understand. So Steve, it's actually not death by spreadsheet. We use Google Drive. So each client has their own folder, and then each client has a bat cave, which is what we call it, which is where we do all our work, and a deliverable sheet, which is what they get to see. That's it. There's only 2 spreadsheets per client. Everything is done within those 2 spreadsheets. Cool. I'm going to keep rocking and rolling. I only have 5 minutes. So here's the ideal capture setup, right? You want a sourcing data platform. The only thing that exists now is a spreadsheet where you can source from any platform and then have the data normalized, right? So like these arrows here would basically be quickly. Everything loads into quickly and gets normalized into a spreadsheet. Then everything from the spreadsheet goes into messaging. Everything from messaging goes into an ATS. So those are going to be like your 3 main tiers. Again, this is what our spreadsheets look like, guys. Boom. That's the whole thing. They're actually a little bit longer now because we've updated our processes. To Adrian's point, we constantly have to stay ahead of the speed of which Google Sheets can adapt and operate, as well as the efficiency of the data we're collecting and manipulating. So those are all the headers for all of our columns, except for email address, which I hid because I didn't want to share people's emails. We use Sourcewell, as I mentioned, for all of our messaging. And on the back end, we do use Loxo for our ATS for our executive searches, which is awesome because it's super, super customizable and the reporting is pretty bomb on the back end. So as my final thought before I wrap things up here, I told you I would come to this story later. So the way that I actually came about with this like deliverables-based data model here was coming up with an idea, and I just taught somebody about this morning, why I didn't like contingent recruiting and why I hate hourly-based work. Hourly-based work is, to me, somebody saying, hey, the better you get at your job, the less I'm going to pay you. Because if this thing takes you 10 hours to do, I'm going to pay you for 10 hours of work. But if you get so good, it only takes you 5 hours to do, I'm only going to pay you for 5 hours of work, right? John Rose, I love Sourcewell way more than I like John. I'm happy to go over for that. Why do I use an ATS for executive search? It tracks through the process. So with executive search, we have to track like, hey, who have we screened? How many people are in this stage? How many people have we submitted? All of those like kind of like workflow pieces that we don't track in our spreadsheets for our sourcing clients. So I was trying to think like, hey, is there a model where the better I get at my job, the more money I make, right? Because I'm so efficient. So I thought of, hey, I want to be able to gather enough data to charge people money on a flat fee. And the more times I iterate, the more times I mess up and learn and get better, the easier that deliverable is for me, right? So here's what wound up happening, right? So in our house, we have a huge walk-in closet in our master bedroom. It's huge, like a U, right? And I'm not stupid, so I gave my wife the entire closet. So like she actually has like a vanity around the other side, or she's got all her makeup and all that stuff. And the whole closet is hers. That's why you saw all my clothes in my closet, because I'm not dumb. And the dogs, when they got angry, would pee in the closet. as like a spite for her. And so she said like, hey, I want to rip up the carpet and stain the concrete floor. And so I said, hey, I could totally do that. Here's the thing though, I'm the least handy human on the planet, right? So I've never changed a car tire. I can't build furniture from IKEA. I'm in my mid-30s. My parents still don't trust me with power tools, right? I'm that guy. Cook you a bomb-ass chicken parm, but like not the builder of stuff. So she looked at me and was like, okay. She's like the most supportive, wonderful human ever. So she's like, all right, yeah, cool. So it should have taken probably about like 3 to 4 days worth of work. And if we had somebody come in to do it, they would have probably charged us like $1,500 or something. I'll tell you, it took me 4 weeks to do, working tirelessly on the weekends and then spread throughout the week. It cost me well over $2,000 to do it. But at the end of the day, I was able to hand it off to her. And boom, I got the floor, her favorite color. I epoxied it. And it was, talk about making every mistake in the book. I made every mistake possible. But guess what? 6 months later, she said, hey, I want to do my office now. And I said, okay. And this time it took 2 weekends and we nailed the floor. And I thought a month later, you know what? I'm going to do my office. And it took 1 weekend to do my office. And so the point in sharing all this with you is data is going to come. You have to analyze the data and it's going to hurt to get it. Gathering data and learning from that data and your mistakes is not an easy or a fun process. But it's important because every time you iterate on that data and you learn how to be more efficient, you learn how to be more effective, you make these changes that affect the outcome in terms of efficacy and efficiency, not just a number. So that's my jam. That's all I got. I know I'm out of time. Anybody got anything before I jet out of here?
Mike, Batman.
What's up, buddy?
Awesome. Mike.
Nice, man.
Absolutely incredible presentation.
Thanks, buddy.
Absolutely incredible. We're like typing in the chat. I'm going to rewatch. You've, again, given me so much inspiration in terms of the stuff that we don't track and we should be tracking, how you monetize all the data in that sense, and how you deal with your clients, but also how people can use this data internally, right?
Yep.
If you can give one advice, Mike, for people that are not tracking that much or whatsoever, like what like if you could give one advice, like where to start or like how to do it, is there any last minute advice that you can give people? Yeah,
the advice that I'm going to have is 2 pieces. One, make spreadsheets your friend. I know it's uncomfortable for some people. Number 2 is just take the first step. If you're thinking like, oh, where do I start? What do I do? What? It doesn't matter. It actually doesn't matter. Just take a step. Yeah. I'm going to start tracking this thing. It doesn't even matter what this thing is. Just start tracking it. And as you go down that road and you start tracking these things, it almost becomes addicting to know, whoa, well, where else could I do better? Where else could I make this efficiency? How else can I do this job at a higher level, make more money, be more effective, have more time to myself to focus on things I really enjoy doing? All of those will come together. You just have to take the first step.
Awesome. Awesome.
Thanks,
with that being said, Mike, thank you so much. Will you share the slides?
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. So guys, this was our last sourcing webinar of the 10 series. Time flew by. I am so happy that you guys all dialed in and showed up. Even at the 10th one, save the best for last. They sometimes say, Mike, and you definitely over-delivered. Now sounds, even in the presentation, absolutely love it. I made the joke. We deliberately put Mike at the end because otherwise the other speakers might have been intimidated. I would have definitely been. So Mike, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Guys, the recordings will be there. We have our YouTube channel if you want to look back on the webinars. If you're interested to grow your sourcing career, we have a lot of sourcing rules open at Matcher in that sense. So definitely check us out, and as well for recruiters that want to join us. Check out our website. Other than that, we'll be launching our sourcing webinars definitely next year, but there will be more content coming your way. Thank you so much for dialing in, Mike. All the best, and see you guys later.